Good evening, welcome to ITV News Anglia. Here's a look at tonight's main stories. East Anglia's nuclear option. So is the £20 billion project the right one for the region and the country?
I'm at Sizewell for an in-depth look at EDF's plans to build a new nuclear power station, which it says will create tens of thousands of jobs and help cut Britain's carbon emissions. But exactly what impact will that have on local people, the tourism industry, and one of our most important wildlife habitats? We'll hear both sides of the argument.
We're talking 1,140 HGVs a day, 700 light goods vehicles, 600 buses, and up to 10,000 cars.
£100 million a year will go into the local economy during the build of a nuclear power station, and around £40 million a year during operation.
Also in the programme, Extinction Rebellion campaigners return to the scene of their most notorious protest. And if all those pandemic video calls are making you more self-conscious, how a few simple tips can make all the difference. But first tonight, news of a developing story in Great Yarmouth. A section of the River Bure was closed earlier after reports of a serious incident involving a boat and fears for the safety of a woman. Part of Lawn Avenue in the town was also closed, and there was a major response from the emergency services. Well, Rob Setchell is in Great Yarmouth now. Rob, what more can you tell us?
Well, Russell, as you say, the first thing to stress here is that details are very much still emerging about what happened here in Great Yarmouth this afternoon. We have heard from Norfolk Police in the last half an hour that they were called here to North Quay at around 1:30 this afternoon to report of a woman in the water. They describe it as an incident involving a boat. Now, over the last hour or so, in the stretch of river just behind me, close to the yacht station, we've seen search and rescue teams working with the police, with the fire service, with the ambulance service, and there was also a very large cordon put in place around this stretch of the river, around the neighbouring pub and the roads into Yarmouth, which became pretty gridlocked. And in the last hour or so, that cordon has been lifted. The roads are now starting to clear, but as I say, the full picture of what happened here, we just don't yet know.
Rob, thanks very much for that. Next to our in-depth look at one of the region's most talked about and controversial projects, Sizewell C nuclear power station. The electricity company EDF plans to build a new power station on the Suffolk coast. So what will that mean for our region? How will it impact local people and the environment? And what role does nuclear power play in the east as the country moves towards zero carbon emissions by 2050? Well, Tanya Mercer is at Sizewell for us this evening. And Tanya, worldwide attention on a remote part of our region.
Yes, good evening. This small fishing village on the Suffolk coast has been part of international discussions for years. There's been a nuclear power station here since 1966. Firstly, Sizewell A, that's now being decommissioned, and the current station, Sizewell B, famous of course for that large white dome that houses the nuclear reactor. That's due to stop producing electricity in 2035. And now the proposed Sizewell C project. So what are the plans and the timescales? EDF proposes building a twin nuclear reactor costing £20 billion. The station would generate enough low-carbon power for 6 million homes. Compared to fossil fuels, it's estimated it'll save 9 million tonnes of CO2 every year, and it's expected to operate for 60 years. The whole project will take around 10 to 12 years to build, with a construction site covering 620 acres. Now, the planning application has now gone in and people have a last chance to have a say until the end of September. Then it'll be around 18 months before the Secretary of State will make the final decision. If approved, the construction could begin in 2022. So that's the project outline. But what impact will it have on the local community and surrounding areas? What benefits might it it bring? What damage could it cause? I've been speaking to a variety of people about all the arguments both for and against this project.
So the borrow pits will be in that direction. The campus will be up there.
Stephen could lose 20 acres of the land he farms to the construction of Sizewell C.
It means we won't be able to produce as much food for the cows. And we also run a small campsite which has been here since the 1940s, and that will be impacted by building of the power station. I don't want to over-dramatise, but it could destroy us.
And this is what locals fear will become their neighbour for 10 years or more. This is Hinkley Point, the nuclear power station being built by EDF in Somerset. This campaign video shows the Suffolk countryside being turned into the proposed 2,400-bed accommodation campus, excavation pits and the main construction site. EDF intends 40% of material to come by sea and rail. It'll build a 2-village bypass on the A12, 2 park and ride sites accommodating 2,500 vehicles and a link road to the site. But locals say it's not enough infrastructure and the impact will be devastating.
The number of vehicles that we'll have to deal with is going to be phenomenal. We're talking 1,140 HGVs a day, 700 light goods vehicles, 600 buses, and up to 10,000 cars. So this is going to affect not only us, but everyone in Suffolk who uses the A12.
But EDF say this project could be a huge boost for the region. It will provide 25,000 jobs during construction and 900 permanent ones. Around a third will be filled by local people.
It's about getting the best deal for Suffolk and East Anglia, maximising the economic opportunities if Sizewell C is to be built. There is evidence to show that around about £100 million a year will go into the local economy during the build of a nuclear power station, and around £40 million a year during operation.
Here at Brafe Engineering in Woodbridge, they already work with Sizewell B and hope to benefit if the project goes ahead.
It's a boost for the company, just the fact that something's being built in the UK of such high engineering value. We do have a skills gap in the UK, so I think such a big project like Sizewell C can only benefit that in terms of the skills development and the opportunities it could provide.
But those against fear EDF will import existing supply chains and workers who are already being used in Hinkley, meaning local people will lose out. There's also a fear that it will come at a cost to existing businesses, especially the tourism industry. One of those concerned is local brewery Adnams.
So the tourism industry employs approaching 100,000 people. The value of tourism in Norfolk and Suffolk is about 5.4 billion. And all of these things are going to be impacted by a large construction infrastructure project.
The peace and tranquility of this area and the exceptional wildlife is a big draw. Here at RSPB Minsmere, there are serious environmental concerns as Sizewell C would abut the internationally important reserve.
We're concerned about the direct impact, so the noise, the visual disturbance. In essence, that could change, the patterns of the birds and the other species that use the area.
Well, one of the biggest issues is just the scale, to be honest. It's going to be one of the biggest construction sites in Europe, and it's within a really sensitive landscape. There's some really rare species and really rare habitats that if you put a massive development within that, it can have huge amounts of disruptive effects. It's very difficult to replace those habitats, and the worst case scenario is that actually we'd lose all the rare species.
Coastal scientists are working with EDF to survey coastal processes and understand what measures are needed to protect the area.
Part of EDF's proposal is to build a shingle top-up, raising this shingle ridge and going further back with extra shingle. And what that means is that if the coast does start to erode in future, the beach will have more sediment, so it won't erode as quickly. And then behind that would be a hard structure, and it's been designed to withstand extreme climate change events.
But others say the coastline is too volatile, and with climate change and rising sea levels, it's too dangerous to have a critical piece of infrastructure and radioactive waste remaining on site for more than 100 years.
So this coastline does erode very rapidly. It's some of the fastest eroding coastline in Western Europe. EDF's submission to the Planning Inspectorate is quite simply shocking. Their designs for the sea defences are unbuildable. They do not meet any form of design standard.
As the government strives to reach its target of net zero carbon emissions by 2050, efficient energy is key. EDFs say nuclear is clean and reliable, but others are concerned it's too slow and expensive.
It's not making any contribution to climate change before, at the very earliest, 2040. Now that's much too late. We're going to need a carbon neutral electricity system by around about 2030, 2035 at the latest, if we're able to meet the government's goal.
This battle has raged for decades. Each side is hugely complex. It seems the future of our energy and this region's role in it is more critical than ever. Now, there is another controversial element in this story, and that's the potential involvement of a Chinese state-owned company called CGN. Back in 2016, EDF signed an agreement with CGN for them to provide 20% of the cash needed to build Sizewell C. And they've also applied for a licence to build and run their own nuclear power station down the coast at Bradwell-on-Sea in Essex. But the problem is, since that agreement, tensions between the UK and China have escalated. We've had Huawei, tensions over Hong Kong and the coronavirus pandemic. And all of that has led to concern about a Chinese state-owned company having such a big stake in such a critical piece of national infrastructure.
China, unfortunately, has changed a great deal and seems almost with each passing day to become a potential adversary. This isn't about people hacking my personal details or your personal details. It is about giving a foreign country whose aims and ambitions are not the same as ours the ability to turn the lights off.
So a huge amount of pressure on the government from all sides, including their own backbenchers, about the potential involvement of China. But the question remains, can a multi-billion-pound project like this still go ahead without Chinese money?
Well, a few days ago, I put many of those points to Sizewell C's director, Julia Pike, and I began by asking her, at a time when we're seeing a boom in renewable energy, why now was the right time to be building a nuclear power station right here in our region?
So we talk an awful lot around progress to the future, and we think new technologies will come along, but we have to recognise what's happening at the moment is that when there's not a lot of wind, we're burning gas, and then people say, well, you can import electricity. Well, if you look at facts, then what's happening today is that we're importing really dirty electricity plus some nice clean French nuclear to support our system. So we need nuclear to support the growth of renewables and make electricity when the wind's not blowing. Then the second reason is jobs. If you look at what's happened at Hinkley, we've actually got 40% of the workforce coming from the local area. And that's the sort of figure, or possibly even higher, that we would aim to replicate at Sizewell.
Campaigners say that there are 5 times as many businesses which can have access to the supply chain around the Hinkley area than there are around Sizewell, and therefore some of your figures may well have been overestimated in terms of the benefit to the local economy.
Working with the Chamber of Commerce in particular, there are now 1,400 companies from the Suffolk region registered on the supply chain portals expressing their interest. And it's important to remember as well that there are a lot of East of England companies who are already benefiting from Hinkley. We think we've spent around 900 million in this region on building Hinkley. And then obviously, as I said, we'll be spending much more on the building of Sizewell.
You are proposing to build Sizewell C on the Suffolk coast, which has a £200 million a year tourist economy. 29% of people have said that they may well be deterred from visiting the area at all if the project goes ahead. 39% said they may well visit less often. How are you proposing to mitigate the effects on the tourism economy?
So I think it's really important that we do mitigate any impact on the tourist economy, but I think I would point out that Sizewell A and Sizewell B have been very good neighbours to the tourism economy and also to wildlife. since around about 1966, I think Sizewell A came online, Sizewell B in 1995, and they haven't impacted the tourist economy negatively. There may be some very local impact, and that will be addressed through funding and through initiatives to offset it.
You can't get away from the fact that the cost of building a nuclear power station is huge, the disruption is huge, yet it only has a very short life of generating electricity. To many people, it seems unwise to still be going down the nuclear route at a time when there is so much progress in the renewables industry, and there may well be other technologies which come along which would avoid the building of something like Sizewell C.
So the offshore wind sector has done an absolutely fantastic job in bringing down the cost of generation. But the cost of your electricity bill reflects what does it cost to have a system where on a cold, windless night, you're turning on your electricity. That's the cost of the system. And so what you're really comparing nuclear with, which is obviously not weather dependent, you're comparing that with the cost of very, very, very long-term storage, which is fantastically expensive and doesn't really even exist today.
If we turn once more to the location, proposed location for Sizewell C, it's in an area predicted to suffer from coastal erosion over the next few years. Some say that at a worst case scenario, the site could end up as an island.
The nuclear industry in the UK has got a really, really good safety record. We're not interested in building a power station in order for it to, I think I've seen headlines saying, also fall into the sea or become an island. So we've done a huge amount of work with experts. It will be scrutinised by independent regulators. We're very confident that we're building it somewhere where it can run for the 60 years, which is its planned lifetime.
Finally, there will be I guess a huge amount of thought going on about the Chinese involvement in your projects, given that the government's expressed reservations over Chinese involvement in telecommunications networks, and that the climate really does seem to have shifted to one of caution over Chinese involvement in huge infrastructure projects in this country.
CGN has a right to invest up to around 20% in Sizewell, but whether or not it does invest will ultimately be up not only to CGN, but it will also be up to the government. So this is just a question for the UK government around whether or not it's seeking to have Chinese financial investors in UK nuclear. And we will do whatever it is that the government chooses.
So Tanya, even after years of debate, this is still a hugely complicated issue, but one which is soon to be decided.
Yes, that's right. So many arguments around this huge project, which, if it's given the go-ahead, could dominate this region for quite a few decades to come. That last chance for people to have their say is September the 30th, and then we're only a matter of months away before the Secretary of State will make that internationally critical decision, one of the biggest Suffolk and indeed this whole region has faced for a generation.
Tanya, thank you very much. Well, we do now have a sad update on a story we told you about at the top of the programme. Police have just confirmed that a woman in her 30s has died following that incident at Great Yarmouth. They say the woman, who was from the London area, had become trapped under a boat on the River Bure at North Quay. She was pronounced dead at the scene. You're watching ITV News Anglia. Thanks for joining us.
With Storm Ellen on the horizon, it's going to be a wet and windy spell as we end the week. Join me at the end of the programme. We'll have the full forecast. That's in the next 15 minutes. See you then.
Before that, though, some more of the day's news. And maternity services at Basildon Hospital have been rated as inadequate following 6 serious incidents. A surprise inspection was carried out in June after safety concerns were raised by a whistleblower. It found babies were born in a poor condition in March and April, and women who were classed as high risk gave birth in a low risk area of the maternity unit. The chief executive of the hospital's trust has apologised and said improvements have been made. A man's in a life-threatening condition in hospital following a street fight in Colchester this morning. 9 people were involved in the incident in Vineyard Street, which happened just after midnight. A 46-year-old man was found unconscious and suffered serious head injuries. 2 women were also assaulted. A 26-year-old man has been arrested on suspicion of assault. More than 60 firefighters spent the night dealing with a fire at a recycling plant in Suffolk. It broke out at the VC Cook site on the Ella Industrial Estate near Beccles just before 10:30. Crews have remained at the scene for most of the day. The cause of the fire isn't known yet. Rail commuters in the region are facing another increase in season ticket prices. Fares are set to rise by 1.6% from January, despite passenger numbers having fallen dramatically during the pandemic. It means passengers will have to pay an extra £33 for a season ticket between Thetford and Norwich. The government says the increases will be the lowest in 4 years.
We work with the government on rail prices. Statutory regulated fares are set by the government, and obviously at the moment we are managed by the government. We've got this emergency measures agreement and we're very much in the government's hands, and we will work with the DfT to provide the best possible service for the people of Britain.
This year's pantomime at the Regent Theatre in Ipswich has been postponed due to the impact of the pandemic. The production of Aladdin was due to run at Christmas, but bosses at the theatre say they've taken the decision to call it off because it wouldn't have been financially viable.
Nobody wants to feel like a Scrooge and be the person responsible for cancelling the panto for Christmas. It's such a great event that people look forward to, but yeah, we just got to do it to make sure that everybody stays safe.
Next this evening, members of the environmental action group Extinction Rebellion have been in court today facing charges of criminal damage. It's in connection with a week of protests earlier this year, which targeted the University of Cambridge, as Matthew Hudson reports.
Members of Extinction Rebellion aren't noted for being camera shy, but one or two of them objected to our filming outside Cambridge Magistrates Court. 6 members of the environmental group appeared in person today, 5 of them pleading guilty to offences committed during their week of action in the city back in February. The most high-profile stunt that week took place here outside Trinity College on February the 17th. 22 protesters took part in a demonstration claiming that the college has major links to fossil fuel industries. As part of the protest, part of a lawn was dug up. This was the scene at the time. This afternoon, members of the group were back at Trinity for another protest and more amenable to the cameras.
Environmental groups have been shouting about this for decades, and now the writing is on the wall. It is so dangerous now, so we have to get noticed. We have to shout from the rooftops.
Gilbert Murray in the red tie, who's from Cambridge, and Gabriella Ditton in the striped top, who lives in Norwich, were both fined and ordered to pay compensation after admitting criminal damage. Miss Ditton also admitted causing damage during a protest outside the city's Schlumberger building the following day. She'd sprayed a logo and slogan on a door and window. Donald Bell and Annie Hoyle, both from Cambridge, also admitted criminal damage and obstruction at the same event. They both glued themselves to police vehicles containing arrested protesters. The case against Caitlin Fay, who admitted criminal damage at Trinity College, was adjourned until next month for reports. The group has retained a high profile on social media throughout lockdown. Now members are promising a return to actual demonstrations. Matthew Hudson, ITV News in Cambridge.
Some football news now. Northampton Town captain Charlie Good is heading to the Championship. He's beaten playoff finalist Brentford. The fee is a club record sale for the Cobblers. Now, during the pandemic, many of us have been using platforms like Zoom, Skype or Google Hangouts to keep in touch and for business. But all those video calls have been likened to seeing yourself in a mirror day in, day out. And we don't always like what we see, do we? As Lauren Hall reports.
As a personal trainer, Mike Williams from Bishop Stortford believes it's important to look good and feel good. That's why he's considering cosmetic treatment for something he became more aware of during lockdown when he started doing more video calls.
When you're on a Zoom call, you see some things that you don't necessarily like. I've always been a little bit self-conscious of my hairline. I was kind of seeing that. It definitely has become a thing that I am aware of and I would like to get sorted. That being said, hopefully there'll be less Zoom calls coming through, so maybe I'm not going to see myself on camera as much, but it's certainly been something that's been brought to the forefront of my mind.
He knows he's not the only one. He's part of a networking group for local businesses, and the other members have been having similar experiences.
I know you've been doing quite a lot of these virtual calls recently. How have you been finding it? And do you think it's made you feel any more self-conscious?
I would say yes. For some reason, Zoom seems to highlight all your worst bits.
Everything is in this box, you know, so it's kind of all the focus is on your face.
You find a million things that you want to criticise about yourself.
It's the longest you ever spend looking at yourself.
Yeah.
Full stop, isn't it?
For some, it's a matter of mindset, and they may just need to change emotionally rather than physically.
It's pretty common, but if you're putting your energy in focusing on your flaws, they will grow. But if you put your energy into focusing on your strengths, they will grow.
One way to focus on those strengths is to make sure your video call is set up properly. We asked one of our camera operators here at ITV Anglia for a few top tips.
First off, I think one of the most important things is lighting. So I'm here in my kitchen and I've got a nice big window in front of me. My face is lit up rather than having the light behind me, which bleaches out the background and doesn't do you any favours. The second thing is to make sure your laptop's positioned correctly. This laptop's down on my dining room table and it's quite an unflattering angle. So easiest thing to do, grab yourself some books so you can get the camera level with your eye line.
A few changes can make all the difference. While many of us have become used to doing video calls, what we're not used to is seeing ourselves on them. Lauren Hall, ITV News.
And if you've been inspired, you can see more top tips from our camera operator Tom on our website. Just head to itv.com/Anglia. Time to talk to Chris now. Hello, Chris. Now we're going to be talking wet and windy conditions.
We are indeed, Russell. Yes, we've got a lot of wet weather actually through much of the rest of this afternoon, but it will clear. But it's actually a second part of the story because this is the culprit, Ellen. Storm Ellen tracking its way across the United Kingdom. Notice a real squeeze on those isobars over the coming few days, particularly for all of us on Friday. And the question is, you know, when we see these storms, how are they going to impact us? Well, actually, for Friday, we're looking at top wind gusts in the range of 45, maybe up to 50 miles an hour. So if you're on a staycation, make sure you stay tuned to the forecast. Here's the details.
Greater Anglia sponsors ITV Anglia Weather.
So yes, across much of the region, first thing this morning, a gorgeous bright start today, a lovely sunrise here earlier on today, but the cloud very quickly began to increase from the south and the west, heralding the arrival of some rather persistent rain by this afternoon, grey and gloomy skies with quite persistent and heavy rain at times. And this is the culprit, Storm Ellen, named by the Irish Met Service, bringing some very strong winds across western parts of Britain and into the Republic of Ireland over the coming few days. And actually by Friday, we could be looking at gusts of around 45 to 50 miles an hour. So not great news if you're on a staycation. So as we go through this evening and overnight, well, we say goodbye to the first band of rain and next band whips its way through, but generally clears out by dawn tomorrow morning. But with a southwesterly airflow, it will be mild. Temperatures holding up between 15 to 18 degrees. For tomorrow, as for Thursday, we say goodbye to the cloud first thing in the morning and actually stark contrast tomorrow. Near enough wall-to-wall sunshine, a little bit of a 1 or 2 showers by the afternoon, a blustery day as well, with gusts in excess of 25, maybe 30 miles an hour because of Storm Ellen yet again, but a warm day as well. 23, maybe even 24, 25 or 26 degrees Celsius, and much the same across eastern parts of the patch there. That's the upper 70s of Fahrenheit. Now here times of high water, we're looking at Southwell there at 9 minutes past midnight and 7 minutes past 12 tomorrow afternoon. As for Friday, sunny spells, but the wind's really packing a punch on Friday. Notice a yellow weather warning issued by the Met Office. We could be seeing gusts of 45 to 50 miles an hour. Yes, a few bands of rain into western areas by the latter part of the day, but still those temperatures generally into the low 20s. So here we are at the outlook over the coming few days and the rest of the week and the weekend. Yes, it stays fairly windy. The winds are a real feature, particularly during the first half of this weekend too, moderating through Sunday and temperatures back to where they should be. Take care.
Greater Anglia sponsors ITV Anglia Weather.
Oh, Chris, you wouldn't want to be camping at the moment, would you?
It's awfully blowy at this time of year with those very deep areas of low pressure.
That's it from the two of us. Have a good evening. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.